Thank you all so much for having us today. As Martin said, I'm Julie Ma, and I'm a co-PI on the On-Demand grant, and I work at the Massachusetts Green High Performance Computing Center. We have a surprise guest today, Jeff Ormstrom, one of our key developers on the On-Demand team, and he'll be talking a little bit about some of our most recent developments in On-Demand 3.1. And then, as Martin said, we're really excited today to have Len Wisniewski and Martin to talk about their implementations or aspects of their implementations at Harvard and at University of Utah. For some reason, my controls are not working the way I expected. So today we'll be, as I said, giving a quick overview of the On-Demand project and recent developments, and then talking about these, and finally talking a little bit about how to get involved with the project. Before we get any further, I hope that you all bear with me and do this quick Menti survey so that we can get a good idea of who's here and how we can maybe adjust our comments to the audience that we have. So let me see if I can do this. All right, so we have 3 questions for you. First is, what is your primary role at your institution? If you're not familiar with Menti, you just go to menti.com and enter this code, and then it'll bring you to this survey, and you can pick what your role is at your institution. And we'll give everybody a few minutes to do that. Okay, we're at about half the audience, maybe a few more people, and then we'll go to the next question. Okay. Our next question is, what is your experience level with Open OnDemand? And it can range from none, here to learn, to old hand, been here as long as the project has been around, which is it's just a little over 10 years now. Thank you, it's super helpful. All right, and our last one, this is usually kind of fun. Could you just write down the first few words that come to mind when you think about Open OnDemand? And it'll build a word cloud. This is great. Thank you all so much. All right, we'll give you another second. Amazing. Thank you so much. And then we have a question that is not really a question, but it's ask us anything. You can post here or you can post in the chat, and hopefully we'll be able to get to all your questions by the end of the talk. Go back to my other screen. All right. So I'm going to go through the Open OnDemand introduction a little fast, although we do have a few folks that are not familiar, so I will go through these slides. So Open OnDemand is an open source portal that allows you to make your organization's HPC resources available through the web so that people can access it basically from anywhere on any device that has a web browser. From a end user or a client point of view, this means there's zero installation. You literally browse to the on-demand instance for your site, and you can start using your computing resources. That and on-demand interface is very easy to learn, as we saw actually in the word cloud, and use. And so the idea here is that it just greatly simplifies access to your HPC resources. People don't have to think about schedulers and bash and scripts or any of that to get started with the HPC resources. And as I said, it's compatible with any device that has a browser. So this quick video kind of illustrates this point. It's kind of funny. And stars are my other RPI, Alan Chalker. So you can access on demand from your laptop or from your phone or from a tablet. All of these are kind of expected places where you think where you have a browser and you would be accessing your jobs. You can also access it from a gaming console if it has a web browser. So you can play games and manage your workload at the same time. If you have a Tesla and you have a browser in your car, you can access your on-demand instance from the car and run your jobs while you're in your car. And then if you're really out there, you can access it from a virtual reality headset like Oculus. And the point is that anywhere that you have a browser, you can access your HPC resources and start jobs and manage them. You can also use on-demand to manage your commercial cloud resources. So you can actually request an on-demand instance from AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud. And so those instances are available from those services. You don't have to do anything to configure it. From a system administration point of view, again, the main reason that you would take the time to install on demand on your systems is that it creates this incredibly low barrier to entry for your users. So it's a free and open source software. It's a relatively, it's a reasonable install. And then once you have it installed, it makes it very easy for your users to access your resources. It's also very configurable and flexible. You can put your own logo on it, and you can deploy applications that are appropriate to your user needs. And we'll actually be seeing a bit of that with both Martin and Len's presentations a little bit later. It's deployed worldwide. We estimated about 1,600 plus organizations in 95 countries are currently using on demand. And these are just some example logos of institutions that are using Open On Demand right now. If you don't see your logo go by, please send it to us. If you'd like it to be on this list, we're always happy to add more. The entire list is available on openondemand.org/orgs. And again, this is the list of logos that people have provided to us. We know there's many other people out there that haven't provided their logos, and we're continuously trying to gather more information about our users. Within On Demand, many of the most familiar apps and utilities for using HPC resources have been integrated and enabled within Open On Demand. Not every instance of Open On Demand has all of these apps integrated. However, they've all been integrated somewhere. Almost all, if not all of these, are on the Ohio Supercomputer Center instance of Open On Demand, which is kind of which serves the Ohio State community as well as the surrounding institutions, and is also the first place that we go to deploy any new release of Open On Demand. So before we release it to the general public, we always use our own site, our own parent institution as a test bed for making sure that On Demand works and the utilities are all working appropriately. So there's several ways to get support on Open On Demand. First of all, we have a very robust Discourse site. Discourse, for those of you that are not familiar with it, is a Q&A platform very similar to Stack Exchange. And the on-demand instance of discourse has a very rich set of questions and answers that have been posted by users and sysadmins over the years to share knowledge and also ask questions of our development team. Our developers take turns monitoring the discourse. The response time is usually very fast, and there's great discussion that takes place on discourse. We also, of course, have a GitHub, both our repo and then a significant amount of documentation in GitHub. That's where bugs are reported and new features are requested. We have a Slack workspace, and also if to just get updates from us on a regular basis, you can sign up for our Constant Contact newsletter where you'll get an update about once a month. All of these are accessible from openondemand.org/support. You'll also find there a plethora of videos and publications. Pretty much any presentation that we do that has either a slide deck or a recording is posted on this page. In addition to that, papers and videos, tutorials that are provided by our partners or by our end users are also welcome to be posted here. If you submit them to us, we will post them here. And that's on openondemand.org/events. We also have a number of tips and tricks calls. Martin actually hosts the tips and tricks call series. So it's organized by the community, and Martin's been an incredibly wonderful partner for us in this way. It happens every month on the first Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern time. And this year's July meeting falls on July 4th, so we're not doing that one. But this call is a call where we feature people in the community that have done really interesting implementations with their on-demand, or when we have a new release, we often come and talk about the new release. So it's a really great community that comes and we exchange experiences on that call. We also have an open office hours call where our developers will meet with the community for an hour and a half on the second Tuesday of every month. And it's a time that you can come in and talk about a specific bug or problem that you're having. And sometimes we also have folks come to just find out what's going on. It's a very convivial environment, and we really enjoy meeting with the community in both of these calls. That's a quick overview of the project. Now I'm going to turn it over to our surprise guest, Jeff Ormstrom, who's going to talk about recent developments.
Hi, thank you. So these are recent developments that just launched in project or in 3.1, our latest version. And the first one that we're really excited to talk about is the project manager. And what this does is it will replace the job composer with a thing that we think is a lot more useful for researchers. And so the idea here is essentially you want to submit a bunch of jobs and you want to build out forms for those jobs. So your users can, choose what account they want to use. They can choose how many number of hours that job will take and so on. So you, as the person who is setting up this form, you can choose, oh, I want to add a queue, a selection for queues, or I don't want queues to be exposed. I want them to always submit to this specific queue. You see in the screen, I am submitting to the Owens cluster, and that is not editable. So this job that gets launched will always be submitted to that cluster. So the project manager has this what you see is what you get form builder technology that we're really excited about. So it's the ability to add a bunch of options to a form to be able to submit your job so that users don't have to write shell scripts and memorize sbatch commands or qsub commands, that the form will take care of all that themselves, and all the user is presented with is that form. They don't have to know about the specific flags for your scheduler. Okay, next slide, please. So yeah, so the project manager has the ability to create these forms, and you get these buttons to actually submit and launch the jobs from those forms. So this is the project view page where you've got all these scripts that you're trying to submit. Here in this example, I'm doing waterway analysis. And so on the one side, I'm doing analysis for the Ohio waterways, and on the other side, I'm doing for Indiana, and I can show that form so I can submit it with different options, or I can just quick launch it with default settings in that launch button. And yeah, the UI is subject to change. It has already changed actually. So this came out in 3.1 and it is not enabled yet because it is like very beta, very sort of early access. So sites that want to see this have to actually turn it on for them to see it. But it is very early. So it's all subject to change. Uh, and yeah, so this is what I was talking about with forms. The idea here is, again, users don't have to know about how to actually submit the job with this account or with that script or to that cluster. They just are presented with a form that they can choose. Oh, I want to submit to the Owens cluster. I want to use 715 account. I want the script to be this waterway shell script. So again, it's about making the application easy to use for researchers without them having to know the intricacies of Slurm or your scheduler of choice. So back to form building, we keep harping about form building because I think it's really, really revolutionary. So here in this account here, select field here, I am presenting the user with only 3 of these accounts, or actually only 2 of these accounts, when actually they have access to all 5 accounts. So the idea here being, you limit what the user sees because I, as the person who produced this, I don't want the user using account 715 or account 604. I want them using these 2 accounts, and so I want to only show them these accounts. Conversely, what cluster we submit to, I don't want the users to have to even choose what account or what cluster they submit to. I want to hard code that so that they always submit this job to the Owens cluster. And so it's about limiting options for the user, reducing the number of options they have to look through and memorize while they're trying to do their research. So that was the project manager. Also new in 3.1 is the path selector. So this thing here is if you're presented with a form that has a path that you want to select to as a part of the job options, maybe you want to boot Jupyter to this directory or to that directory. This is a widget that will facilitate that. And previously, we had an external library, some JavaScript that you had to pull down and add to it, and it was like really super clunky. So the idea here is it's just a built-in widget that people can just use, and they don't have to go out and get this external library and mess with it. So again, forms being like a huge part of our business, this allows users to actually save settings in their forms. So here I'm toggling between, half of a large memory node or a large GPU node. And so as you see me toggling there, the hours change, the node type changes. And the idea here is, as a user, I want to save these settings so I can come back to them later and I don't have to fill out every single line in the form. Maybe there are 10 or, I've seen forms with 10 different options. And the idea here is the user doesn't have to actually memorize all 10 of those options. They can save those options as a sort of template and submit their jobs with that template, having those saved settings without having to remember all of them. And then last, I think this is last, but next anyway, Next is the Globus integration. So Globus is a great utility a lot of folks might be aware of. It transfers files from one data center to another very easily through the web. And since so many people have Globus, and since we have this file explorer where you're traversing the files of your cluster on you at your center, if that particular directory is a part of a Globus endpoint, then we will show it. Now have a link to Globus. When you're traversing your local directory, you can link back to Globus, that Globus endpoint that is that same directory.
Last one.
Okay, so this is the last one. All right, great. So the last one we have is just general updates where we're supporting Debian 12 now. We have support for different architectures outside of x86. So we have ARC64 and PPC 64. And then last, sadly, we're dropping support for Enterprise Linux 7 because CentOS 7 ran end of life. And so it's really hard for us to like build packages and test packages on Enterprise Linux 7. So we are saying goodbye to Enterprise Linux 7.
Thank you so much, Jeff.
Thank
We'll
you.
hopefully have some time for questions at the end. But what I'd like to do now is introduce Len Wisniewski from Harvard University, who's going to be talking about Open On-Demand profiles and how they're going to be rolled out at Harvard.
Hi, everybody. Do I have the ability to share my screen?
I believe so. Justin is.
I can do that for you, Len. One moment.
Thank you.
And so this is work that we've been collaborating with the group, Jeff and others at Ohio Supercomputer Center the last couple of years. This work came out in 3.0, so it's a bit retro compared to what Jeff just spoke about. We also collaborate on production with the FAS Research Computing Group at Harvard. Our cluster for social sciences was very small, and so they are great at supporting a large scalable cluster. And so we'll be owning the Open On-Demand front end of that large cluster going forward. And so this demo is just an example of how we're going to go about doing that. This hasn't been rolled out yet, but it is in our dev server stage. And so we'll be rolled out soon. And then I'll be showing ideas about how we'll be expanding this concept of profiles over the next year or so. And then also future development work that's related to that. So let me see here. Okay, so you should see a demo, some slides about Open On-Demand profiles. So before Open On-Demand 3.0, there was always the concept of custom dashboards or profiles. It's just that each time you wanted a new one, you had to set up a separate server. So we added the flexibility to have multiple profiles running on the same server. And so you can see here in this picture in the boxed area in purple that we have two profiles, one called FASI and one called SID. And then you can toggle between those. Now, it's not limited to just two. You could have as many profiles there as you'd like. So the idea for the future is that every department, school, so we have lots of different schools, lots of different departments, lots of different labs, perhaps even different groups of developers with different computing paradigms, such as AI, LLMs and such. And they want one set of tools and other groups want other set of tools. And so the idea is that each department, school, group, lab could have their own profile that shows the apps that they're most commonly using within that group. So here I just gave some mock-ups of, for example, if there was a physics professor with a lab, maybe there's some apps there. And so these app buttons, which was also a newer and improved feature in 3.0, allows you to have more of that look and feel like your phone and your tablet, especially since we can use Open OnDemand on any device. And then going left to right, then you could have a psychology department app, and so they have a lot of interest in SPSS or some brain apps. The school public health may just want the standard default app that everybody is given, but perhaps just want branding, and so there's the ability to rebrand this. And then the fourth one is just an example of where you have perhaps a group that's not a department, but a consortium among multiple departments, but working on the same thing, or same computing paradigm like AI, and want a similar set of tools as well. So from there, I will go to show you a quick demo of just what I talked about. Okay. So you should see this is a console on that dev server. See here, this is a dev server that we have running, and this is the currently the default dashboard or profile that we have when you log on to Open OnDemand at Harvard. And so adding these profiles, then you could drop down in this little question mark menu here. And down here, you can have choices between different profiles. So you could have a whole list of them here. And so, for example, if I switch to SID from the default, just give it a couple seconds there. And then we have this other profile. So you could toggle among them depending on what kind of stuff you're working on, and choose among here. Ultimately, we may have hundreds of departments, program centers, labs, and such with profiles. And so at some point that menu bar may become unwieldy. And so we will be looking in collaboration with the OSC team and others in how we can adapt this to perhaps tie the default profile for each department and such to Unix groups or group of groups that have clusters of different users, so that when they log on within a lab or group, they'll see the set that they want and not have to switch to one, or we won't have to put every profile in the choosable menu as well. So that lends itself to a lot more feature development. And so that's really all I have to say, other than our team will continue to develop features in collaboration with OSC. And so we'd like to hear any feedback you have or any new features, because our stakeholders are the FASRC team at Harvard, the OOD community, and then, of course, researchers. So feel free to contact us through the normal mailing list or discourse, different avenues that Julie mentioned earlier. And we'll be happy to do some user research with you and talk about features that are interesting for you for the future.
Thank you so much, Len. Let's switch over to Martin.
All right, thanks, Julie. So I'm gonna show you kind of more of a typical implementation of Open OnDemand, I would guess to say, just because we more or less took what Open OnDemand provides and did a few customizations, but didn't go as far as modifying too much or at all the code that the Open OnDemand comes with. So I want to show you just a few stats first to get an idea how we deploy Open OnDemand here and what usage we get out of it. So now we have two different environments: the general environment for any researcher, and then protected which is HIPAA compliant. In general, we decided to run two servers, two on-demand servers. One's called OnDemand, the other is called OnDemand class. Although they more or less provide the same functionality, we wanted to separate the classroom use just in case the class gets big and it it becomes an impact on the research side of the Open OnDemand. So far that didn't happen, but we do get about 80 to 110 daily users on the general on demand with the rest of the stats over here. So 2,300 users accessing our last 12 months unique users. That's more or less I would say a big chunk of our total user base at the center. Yeah? So Open OnDemand definitely got to the point where I think it's more or less a part of everybody's research workflow. Then we also have the classes. They kind of vary semester to semester, while we average about 5 to 10 per semester that run on Open OnDemand. And they vary anywhere between 5 to 50 users, really. But daily we get about 30 to 50 during the semester. And then uniquely 70. We had one class that had about 60 users, or 60 students, so that kind of jumped things up a little bit over the spring semester. In the PE, the uptake is a little bit slower, mainly because probably only about a third or a quarter of our users are the PE users, maybe even less than that. So we average about 5 to 7 users daily, 25 monthly. A lot of these people are doing statistics and they are used to run on Windows machines. And we provide Windows servers for them where they can remote desktop to, but we are trying to encourage them to move to Open OnDemand because it's more or less equivalent experience from the user perspective. And then they can scale their research much more because these Windows machines are standalone servers. They are not, cluster nodes. So you can really scale up your computation. So we're trying to do that. But again, people's habits are pretty strong. So we have limited success in there so far. I've spent quite a bit of time working on interactive apps. More or less whenever there is a user that expresses interest or I find that application could be used as an interactive app, I put it on. So we now have 28 of those roughly. I add a new one every other month. You can see the list of them over here. Pretty much the typical applications we would see people running, starting from runtimes like Jupyter through a bunch of engineering applications, statistic applications, some chemistry visualization programs, other visualization. And interestingly, we actually had a user who wanted to load a big Excel spreadsheet, which they couldn't really open on their desktop. And so I told them, why don't you just use one of our cluster nodes, and I installed LibreOffice as an app, and they got their spreadsheet loaded and got whatever they needed out of it. So, that was kind of an interesting side project that got this user what they wanted. And then we're pulling all these statistics out of Google Analytics, which are pretty simple to plug into, and they are kind of interesting thing to look at to sort of see, the trends in and the usage of your instance. So you can see that like interactive desktop is number 4 here. Obviously, people spend a lot of time working their files. So the file viewer has the number 1 number of counts or the page hits and things like that. I wanted to spend a little bit more time on the class support because I think that's something that's working fairly well for us, or it has a good reception both from the instructors and from the students. What we ended up doing over the years is that we moved from giving the students just the Open OnDemand instance and launching the application themselves. We moved to creating specific applications for the classes. And that helped in reducing the confusion in picking the right views, the right parameters for submitting the job and things like that. So, and I will show you a demo in a moment where one of these or few of these apps, more or less we make it as simple as possible. So the student just clicks the button to launch the job, and then that really helps a lot the instructor not having to explain a lot of details about this. It helps with troubleshooting because everybody pretty much has the same interface that they use. In the past, somebody would be coming in from a Windows machine, somebody would have a Mac, few of them would have Linux, and so the professors had a much more difficult time supporting the logins to our systems. These apps mostly are Jupyter. We either use the Jupyter environment or Conda environment that the professor sets up, and we plug it into the app, or we create the whole stack for the class. It really depends on what the professor chooses. Some of the classes still also use interactive desktop or RStudio, again, we just make the parameters for the submission much more simpler. Maybe load a module. We had a geography class, for example, that wanted to use QGIS. So, and they wanted, but the professor wanted to use the terminal. And so we set up an interactive desktop application that started the terminal in the desktop with the QGIS loaded, so people could just run the QGIS out of the terminal and interact with it that way. So that's the apps for the classes. And the other thing that helped us quite a bit, and that's actually, I have to give credit to OSC for the suggestion to do this, is in the past the professor would give us a list of students in a class, and we would kind of semi-automatically enter them into our system and create the accounts. And there was some work on our end. And so we wanted to make this a little bit more, not necessarily automated, but something that we don't have to do. And so what we ended up doing is that we create a token, which is basically some hexanumerical string that is unique for each class, that is valid only on a specific application web page for only specific time when the class is expected to run, or when the professor is giving this information to the students. And so then the students enters their university ID, they authenticate through our university or identity. We have that plugged in, and then they enter this token, and that will automatically provisions their account if the account doesn't exist, or it adds to their account the Unix group for that particular class, so they can have access to that class. And so that's very straightforward. We generate a list and send a list of the students automatically to the professor every week, so the professor can check that these students are actually there, or we're asking them, because there is a possibility that a student can give this token to somebody else who is a university student or university affiliate, and they can become members of the group and do this, and or basically get our account. So we're asking the professor to check that. So far, that hasn't happened, but that's always a possibility. We then automatically deprovision the accounts at the end of the semester. So in that respect, it's okay as well. We are only valid for that limited amount of time when the class is running for that specific Unix group. Yeah, so that's the class support. And so I'm gonna quickly switch to my browser to show you a demo. So the first thing I want to show is the class. So we have these classes over here. Right. So for example, I created a Jupyter environment for chemical engineering, which they use for quite a few of their classes. And so once this loads, it's a little bit slower than usual, but anyway. So notice that these things are there shown, but there is only one choice, right? So we are hard coding the account and partition because they are part of College of Engineering, so they have their own nodes. The only thing they can change is the number of hours, and we limit that to certain amount. Actually, I forgot what we have. This may should be just limited for the amount of this queue, which is like 24 hours or something like that. Yeah, so that is reasonably useful for the interactive apps. They are all listed over here. They are kind of busy, but it's a long list, but it's still not overwhelming. So we're still okay with the length, I guess. And the last thing I wanted to show before we run out of time is that I have to give a shout to Arizona State University, which created this node status app, which is pretty cool, I think. Hopefully it will load, which lists you it lists the nodes one by one. It's actually a plotly plot written in Python, and it shows the status of each node. I'm working with a student. We have a pretty good student worker program at our institution, at our center, and as the student kind of became his name is Sky. He became sort of a JavaScript whiz over the last 3 months, and so he actually modified this thing a little bit to go and filter the partitions as well, because we have quite a bit of partitions. This cluster actually isn't really that busy, but we have quite a few other ones that have a lot of partitions for, say, in the Kondo cluster model. Each research group has their own set of nodes, so you can go and filter out only the nodes that belong to your group, and you can see the busyness of those and things like that. Yeah, so that's something I kind of recommend everybody take a look at. Get in touch with either me or with the folks at ASU. It was actually relatively straightforward to plug it into our systems from what
Thanks so much. Let me share screen with just a quick last slide or two. So just this last section is about how to get involved. And I just wanted to give a very quick overview of the grant that we're working on and why it's really, really important to us to have the community involvement with the project, even more so. As an Open On Demand, it's always been great to have contributors. And as Martin and Len both mentioned, that we've been getting tremendous support from various institutions, Harvard certainly, CSC Finland, developers around the country, but we would love to have more. And we're currently working on a grant, which is called the All Good Project. Alan Chalker is the PI and I'm a co-PI on this grant. And our goal is really broader impacts for the Open On Demand project and increasing the adoption of computing resources across domains, as well as collaboration between public and private computing sectors and engagement with students early on. So just a few components of this grant. We've hired a new developer relations program manager, Emily Moffat-Sadeghi, who's amazing and has been working with our dev team to create a roadmap and also create ways for the community to engage easily with the project. We've identified almost over 36 good first issues. So projects that we feel that anybody who's interested in engaging with us could pick up and be contributing in a really important way to Open On Demand, and also in a way that kind of gets your feet wet with the on-demand project. We've also hired a new security QA technical expert, and Emily and I are kind of splitting the community engagement responsibilities. And we're also working with NumFocus, who many of you may be familiar with, is an organization that is supporting nearly 100 open source projects, some of that you I'm sure would know, like Python, PyData, and Julia, Galaxy, a really broad range of projects. And they're consulting with us to help us to figure out how to expand our universe of contributors, as well as of supporters of the project. And finally, we have a program with students at OSC, headed by a graduate research associate who is mentoring them and giving them early introduction to the on-demand platform. We are running a survey right now where, for anybody that is currently wanting on-demand, we would really appreciate this. It should not take you very long to run it. The survey includes a number of scripts that you run in your on-demand instance. It gives us a listing of the apps you have, the current version you're deployed, and a quantification of sorts of the clients. It's available from openondemand.org/survey, and this will really help us with making sure that we have a good model of what the community is really looks like, and what people are running on their various sites. And just to summarize some of the things that we've already said earlier, ways to get involved with us. First of all, just spread the word. Oh, this should be X. Mention us on Twitter or X or whatever your social media platform is. Pitch in, as I said earlier, with our GitHub issues that are good first issues, or tell us if you're seeing something that is an issue for you, either on Discourse or again on GitHub. And engage with the community, participate in our calls, write documentation, write code, or if you're so inclined, to help us to fund the project. So these are all ways to get involved. We really are hoping to get a lot of involvement from the community over the next few years with under the auspices of this grant. And finally, I just wanted to thank you and leave a little bit of time for questions and comments. I'm not putting everybody's email addresses here because I didn't ask them ahead of time if I could, but please contact me if you have any specific questions, or go to our Discourse or our GitHub to ask questions or submit bugs or feature requests. So with that, I know that Jeff has been doing a great job of answering questions in the chat, but are there any questions that anybody would like to ask of any of our speakers? Okay. Thank you. I see that Martin is also asking questions in the chat. So, feel free to continue to post questions in the chat. And again, we really appreciate your time today. We will be at ISC next week. We have a booth, that's the International Supercomputing that takes place in Hamburg. And then we will be at PERC. In between that, we have our monthly tips and tricks calls as well as the office hours. So please join us. Let us know what we can do if you're running into any roadblocks. We're really interested in hearing what the community has to say, and also in, of course, deploying on demand on a broader scale as much as possible.